Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session on fostering political stability in Africa. We've got an hour and a quarter, to discuss it, and a very distinguished panel. My name is Richard Dowden. I run the Royal African Society in Britain, and I've been working on Africa. I first went to Uganda in 1971 as a teacher and then turned into a journalist and been visiting it pretty much for the last 30 years. So I can't say I know it well. It's such a big place. Bill Clinton won an election on the slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." But I always say in Africa, it's the politics that really count. And I think that one of the big questions that Africa faces at the moment is whether you can have growth without real democracy and good governance. And I think the answer from what we've seen is, yes, you can have lots of growth, and the figures are all good. But as we saw in Tunisia, which got almost AAA rating from the World Bank, and its economic policies were all blessed by everybody, well, we just saw what one man did to that regime in a horrible way when Mohamed Bouazizi set fire to himself, but it sparked the Arab Spring. So, and the message there was that if you don't have the rule of law and human rights, no matter how much good growth you have, you're going to hit the buffers sooner or later. And I think that was the point that Kofi Annan mentioned this morning when he said it was the human rights and the rule of law which drove people onto the streets, and that Africa must listen to the lessons of the Middle East and North Africa. So I think unless it involves women and it involves young people, it's not, the politics aren't just a male activity. The danger is that your economy, well run according to the IMF, the World Bank, and all the experts, will take off like a rocket, and then it will explode because of the politics. Of course, I'm not saying politics is easy. I mean, somebody referred to Africa as a new continent this morning. And it is the oldest continent, and it is the continent that we all come from. It is the mother continent. And I think the greatest, to me, the greatest problem with the politics is that it's very, very old societies in new states. So you had between 6,000 and 10,000 political units in Africa before colonialism, and 2,000 languages and counting. I work at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and their latest figure for African languages is still counting. They're still finding new ones, more than 2,000. So you think of Europe having 23 and having real problems with that. 2,000 languages in this continent. So how do you form these new 54 states out of these old societies with very different cultures and different languages? I think that's the big question. So we've got a very distinguished panel here. Unfortunately, Jean-Ping, the chairman of the African Union, can't be with us, but Erastus Mwencha, who is the deputy chair, who's here on my left, is standing in for him, and he's a former Secretary General of COMESA, so we can talk about integration and trade with him as well. And we have Robert Sichinga, who's the Minister of Commerce, Trade and Industry from Zambia, and by background is a chartered accountant and an expert on the legislative framework for investment, much needed person. Halima Ahmed is a political activist and parliamentary candidate from Somalia, and works at the Youth Rehabilitation Center, which helps young Somalis who've got caught up in war to do more peaceful activities. I think that's right, is it? Yeah. Bekele Geleta, who spoke at the plenary session earlier, is the Secretary General of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, and has a background in NGOs. Bineta Diop is chair of the executive board of Femmes Afrique Solidarité and won the UN General Assembly Human Rights Prize in 2003. And she works in conflict and in post-conflict societies, particularly with women trying to put societies that have been through war back together again. And last, but not in any way least, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, the Metropolitan of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, who is originally a psychologist and was a lecturer at Wits. So I'm going to ask Erasmus Mwencha to start and tell us, after the 1990s wars subsided and the African Union was set up, intervention by other African countries was now allowed. Before there was total non-interference, now you can. How are you managing that these days when in the last few months we've had a few problems? There's been Mali, there's Guinea-Bissau, and of course Sudan. I mean, are you chasing your tail all the time trying to sort these problems out, or are you ahead of the game?
Thank you very much, moderator. And, well, let me start with your opening remarks. You quoted Bill Clinton saying, "Is the economy stupid?" And one could also ask it the other way around, is the politics stupid? Our take is that it's both. And the studies have shown, particularly in the African context, if you look at Africa, both political and economic stability are always under threat. And because of that, this leads to the underdevelopment, because one feeds to the other. And it is because of bad politics, the mix of the two, if that balance is not there, that you see the elements that come out in the form of politics of exclusion or marginalization or ethnic biases and so forth, all those evils that lead to political stability and also affect economic stability. Now, your question is, how is Africa managing? It's true that at the onset of independence and when the OAU was established, there was an element of non-interference. This has dramatically changed. Come now the establishment of the AU, that aspect was dispensed with, and there's a framework that if your neighbor's house is on fire, you can intervene, particularly where there are instances of affecting human rights. And it is because of that, together with the creation of an architecture for intervention, an architecture which under the African Union is known as the African Peace and Security Architecture, that you can see now peace largely prevailing in the continent. Statistics will show you that if you look at Africa, say 10, 15 years ago, there were at least 20 or so active wars in the continent. And that is because there was no mechanism for intervention. But now with that mechanism, this is reduced. We are talking of hardly 5 active intervention. Now, this structure has helped in a number of ways, but there is also an added aspect. The fact that the African leaders have also embraced democracy. Democracy that has come, not necessarily on a silver plate. In some cases, you have had to go through bloody civil wars, and in some cases, the transition was much easier. But there is now political space in much of Africa. If you look at Africa, democracy is spreading, the number of elections that take place, this changes. But of course, what catches the headline is the instances of what happened, for instance, in Mali, what has happened in Guinea. In this year, we have had at least 5 elections. It's only the 2 that now stand out, Guinea and Mali. And of course, those are significant because To outside world, Mali would be Africa. To outside world, Ethiopia is Africa. And so when anything happens, that is Africa. And so one must also distinguish and know that Africa is not a country. Africa is 54, and you have a continuum from where you have democracy as good as you can find anywhere in the world, but where you have still also challenges and countries that are still in transition.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sichinga, Zambia has had, since 1991, I think 4 changes of government, and well, 2 of government and 2 of party, but 4 presidents. We're into our 4th president to then. And you never read about any violence from Zambia or problems or rebellions. Why isn't Zambia held up as the model for the whole continent? It seems to have done exceedingly well on the political front.
I'm wondering about that too. Thank you, Richard. But maybe before I respond to that and share with the gathering about Zambia's experience, let me just compliment what Brother Mwencha has just talked about. I think we need to understand that the outside world tends to view Africa as though it was a country, as though it was one country. And more often than not, the news about Africa has, generally speaking, been of a negative kind. In other words, if there's a problem in any of the countries, it means it has affected the entire Africa. And so, to a large extent, I believe that this is why it is so necessary that we can no longer have the situation of that's an internal matter. And we, so long as it does not affect our country, we should not get involved. And I totally agree that the position of the African Union, or even the regional groupings for that matter, intervening as ECOWAS, as, at least I can remember of 2 occasions have done, I think becomes a very important issue because it is representative of Africa. And if, to relate it to the theme of this particular conference, if there's a problem in one African country, and you go out there and try to invite, say, foreign direct investment into a country that is not even a neighbor, the immediate reaction is, oh, Africa is unstable and therefore we cannot invest in it. And for that reason, I think it becomes important for us to be concerned not only about our respective countries, but about the entire continent. So let me just say that I buttress that. And let's answer the question, why is political stability important? You have, in your introductory remarks, have given the example of Tunis, and there are many other countries, including my own, where we have had growth without human development. And that is a challenge. So when with the World Bank and the IMF and other international institutions look at it, my own country, for example, has had GDP growth above 7% and rated one of the 10 fastest growing economies on the continent. I ask the question, how does that interpret into benefit for the average person? How do you calculate your GDP? How do you calculate your income per capita? Well, you take the population divided by your GDP and you arrive at, and that does not reflect the spread of the shall we say, the wealth of the country, or indeed, for that matter, even the GDP. And in environments which I'm sure are prevalent in most African countries, where you have a commodity or commodities on which the country depends, you can also have a lot of GDP being attributed to that particular activity, for example, mining or agriculture or gas, oil, but that does not benefits more the investor than does the local people. Hence, you have the situation in North Africa where the citizens felt they were not participating. So in answer to that, I would say investment, growth, wealth creation, and social development really can only occur in an environment which is politically stable. Let me also say that good politics usually result in stability which are conducive to development. And here I'm talking about economic development, social development, the whole works. And if an environment is not conducive, it has its attendant problems. And these are just sort of listed them, not in any priority order. But one, you cannot attract domestic investment, let alone foreign investment. You won't be able to do that in an environment which is unstable. And I therefore say it's almost impossible to have development in an environment which is politically unstable. That's one point. Secondly, chaos comes with it the attendant problems of corruption. People take opportunities and chances as they see them. Secondly, the social unrest that results from that. We know of cases of, for example, rape that goes on with the confusion that arises. Schools are disrupted. Education systems are disrupted. Medical systems are disrupted. And I noticed from our agenda that we'll be talking later on about preparedness in terms of challenges of, shall we say, upheaval, natural disasters, and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about that. But there's also the issue of internal displacement of people. And my own country, for example, has been a haven for many, many nationalities. South Africans who are fighting for their independence regard Zambia as their home. We had Zimbabweans. We have, in fact, some have just settled there. We had Namibians. The Institute of Namibia started from Lusaka. We had Malawans that some of them have become Zambians now. We have had Congo's situation, Rwanda's situation, Burundi's situation, almost with the exception of two countries, Tanzania and Botswana. The rest of the countries surrounding our country have had to find refuge in that environment. It creates pressures on us, but at least there was a place they could go to. So I'm answering the question of political stability and the benefits that it can have. The refugee problem, in fact, continues even further. When people have settled in a country, let's take Angolans, to this day, we are still dealing with the problem of expatriating them to their respective countries. So the issues that arise as a result of destabilization and instability, political instability, are such that even the economics that we're talking about here, the growth that we're talking about, the development that we're talking about, cannot really take place. So in terms of my starting point, that is the case. And certainly, Zambia, probably much more to God's grace rather than to our own actions, certainly has been spared that problem. We have held in every 5 years, throughout, from 1964, 1991, when we reverted back to democracy, to a multi-party democracy, the term was curtailed. In the third year, we held elections. And I think that President Kaunda deserves our commendation because he was the president, he was the founding president, and even in 1991 had still a 2-year mandate. He decided he was going to call for elections after consultations, and what did he do? When the elections were held, he lost elections and demonstrated such great statesmanship that it set an example to those that followed thereafter. And I think the issues of what leaders do and the precedents that they set become important consequentially. And so President Kaunda handed over power in a peaceful manner and did not resist that. So the next president came in. After his 2 terms, he wanted to have a 3rd term, and the whole country was up in arms and said, you're not going to have it, and you must stop there. And so we stopped him. He could not have his 3rd term. And then the next president came in. He too, unfortunately, died in office. Again, we had a by-election, which went peacefully. There was a 3-year term that was remaining, which was run by another president. He lost the election last September, and I belong to the new government. And he physically came out to symbolically hand over the instruments of power to the next president. And I think in answer to the question that you've raised, this was such an important thing, and I think he only did it because the first president has set a precedent that showed that this needed to be done and done this manner. And maybe arising from this, Malawi had a similar challenge that as we had only a month ago when the president died in office. And I think that Malawi could have done differently because here was an outgone president or a dead president who had placed his own young brother as Minister of Foreign Affairs to take over from him. He couldn't go ahead and do that. Even the estranged vice president had to be brought in to observe that. And I am almost set in my mind it was because it was influenced by the Zambian experience. Had we not had that transition, I'm sure that Malawi would probably have gone differently. So what we do in one country has impact on the rest of the countries around us, and especially the African Union. We owe it to each other to make sure that we have political stability that leads us to an environment where we can have economic stability and the benefits to our people. Maybe I can pause here for the moment as my colleagues let me contribute to this discussion.
Thank you very much for that. I'll ask now Halima Ahmed to talk a little about going from the most peaceful and, I don't know how to say it, country to the one that is possibly the most fragmented. And it's ironic because there are, by my count, only 2 or 3, maybe 4 if you count Lesotho and Swaziland as well, but the big countries that only have one ethnic group, or largely one ethnic group, Botswana and Swaziland. And Botswana, as we all know, is the model, and that's the country that is perfect and always held up as such. And the other is Somalia, the other end of the scale. But I have great faith in Somalia. It is one of my favorite countries. So I think it will come right. So Halima, please tell us, just tell us the story of whether Somalia's breakup means that you've got to go back to the roots, or whether what Somalia needs is a big, strong president and a big, strong state to rule the whole of the territory.
Well, I thank you. It is unfortunate to talk about Somalia whenever, whenever I talk about Somalia, people always think of piracy, think of terrorism, famine, but we also have a beautiful side of the country. Well, it's a good question, and I don't believe Somalia needs a strong military power to recreate a greater Somalia. If that makes things possible, then the Operation Restore Hope would have functioned, and other alternatives that have been tried during the 21 years of civil war. And the African troops would have succeeded extremely well in a very short time if that is what we need. What we need is a democracy based on our history and on our culture and on our people's values. You cannot, for instance, right now we have a very weak government that lives in a very small little island within Mogadishu, which is the State House. I am saying that because I also live there. I'm saying that because there is a full disconnection between the government of Somalia in the State House and the people of Somalia outside the State House. And you cannot govern and lead people if you're really disconnected from what they need and what they believe in. Somalia was a very democratic country by culture, within its own societal culture. I am saying that because in the 60s, in our first presidential elections, we had the opportunity to vote, whether women, men, whether elder leaders or whoever they were. People had the opportunity to vote, and elect who they wanted to represent them, and I think that's a great experience that we had. And also we had the opportunity to, basically women had their voice, and the local community was taken into consideration, and the leaders that we had were actually elected by the people of Somalia. And that has vanished with the Siad Barre government, because that was a communist system that did not give any choice. It was all about, hey, let's go together, we're going to build the country, we're going to do this. But he actually kind of misleaded the country, and that has led us to a civil war that was going on for 21 years. I am sorry because I speak French. I feel more comfortable. I apologize if you guys cannot follow me.
That's fine.
Can I switch that to French? Okay, in English, is that okay? You guys understand me?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Great, because I really feel comfortable in French. Anyhow, in 21 years, all the alternative that we had was warlords represented, that were representing small groups of clans and ethnics, and no national security, no national institutions, no national power, and people have just become kind of dismantled, the society dismantled, and that has actually deepened the dysfunctioning and the insecurity in Somalia. Fortunately, since the conference in Djibouti in 2000, people seem to be trying to get some sort of a government in the country. We had developed a political power sharing formula. That doesn't really work, but anyhow, we have developed that. And the Ethiopian troops have came in. We have the ICU, the Islamic Courts Union. All this did not help Somalia to have a great power. Why? Simply because these powers were not connected to the Somali society. You cannot represent people if you're not connected to them. What Somalia right now needs is to have a proper democratic working system. Well, we need to dig a little bit more of inside, in the Somali culture, one, and we also need to basically recreate the educational curriculum, which has vanished for the last 21 years. I'm actually impressed, honestly speaking. And we need to empower women, youth, develop some societal projects. But if you don't do that, you cannot talk about democratic elections and democratic movements and democratic government and democratic power. You cannot. And if weapons can serve you to be in power, then in such case, people would have been in power for a long time. Sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned that traditionally Somalia was quite a democratic society.
Yes.
But my understanding was the decisions would have been taken by old men, full stop. Women and younger men would not have been involved. And is that what happened, that the young men with guns defeated the old men? Why didn't the traditions, the very strong traditions, reassert themselves?
Well, okay, usually the way we work in our society is that full respect is given to clan elder leaders. But then they also give the opportunity to raise their voice to the local society, whether women or young people. That was the Somali culture. But that has vanished. You cannot even, no matter if you're an old leader, old clan representative leader, or if you're a woman, or if you're a very intelligent young person, you cannot argue and face a warlord. Full stop. Yeah. You just can't, with a Kalashnikov on your face.
So what's the answer to defeating the warlords? I mean, you've got a foreign, you've got an African Union force there, Ethiopian force. I mean, how can Somali society defeat those warlords and re-establish its own?
Well, we actually got rid of the warlords. It just like the Arab Spring, all the people in Somalia had just enough of those wars after wars, wars after wars. We decided, the people of Somalia have decided to create the Islamic Courts Union, and that has worked very good, very well. All people stood up and followed this ICU. They wanted to have something to believe in and a local organization that was connected to their beliefs. So that happened. But then the arrival of the Ethiopians, it was a helping country, but unfortunately the way Somalis see Ethiopia, based on the history that they had, it wasn't a good idea to send Ethiopia. Maybe it could have been better to send other troops. And that has actually, the war between the government and the ICU and the fact that the Ethiopian were backing the government has actually created a more sensitive emotion within the society, and that has led us to develop the Al-Shabaabs and all that. So I don't think it was a good idea. However, it's good that we have the African troops now. They are helping. They're doing a great job. We have ousted Al-Shabaab. I am myself working with the defectors of Al-Shabaab, and I can tell you that it's not a pleasure every day. But we kind of are having some sort of a shape of what a government could look like. And hopefully the next government will be way better than this one, because all the diaspora are coming back from one aspect, and also the young generation is also trying to get into the government with great ideas, with new initiatives that they want to implement, because they know about the people, and they know what they have suffered of. So hopefully we'll get something better soon.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We will come back to this a little later. Bineta, Diop, you work with women, and we always think of wars, whether they're in Africa or anywhere else, as men with guns. Very rarely women with guns, I notice. But it's always the women and children who suffer. That's my experience. And what have you been able to do about that?
I think, first of all, let me just, congratulate my sister Halima, young sister that have been fighting in her country to get her voice heard and to transform. Here we are talking about economic growth, and I think visibly Africa is doing well. And also the African Union, Dr. Mencha mentioned the fact that African are also solving the problems in terms of the conflict. So there are less and less wars that are going on. But we also need to realize that we need a gender revolution in Africa. And African women are working toward that revolution. Like we say, we want an agriculture revolution. We need a gender revolution. The minister here talked about rape. Where is it happening in the world? That when conflict happens, the women are the most to suffer. This is the brand of our economy. This is the people, the women that are taking care of the communities of the family. So what happens if you destroy the majority of your population? And when we say that we don't see the transformation of the economic growth to the communities, we can understand that when you talk about economic governance, you need also to have that political governance and good governance. You know, in some country, people say, I don't eat road. I hear you so much. I don't eat road, but I want my human rights because that is the right that give you maybe access. And the key issue is access. Access to education, access to health facilities. The key is making sure that it's not one group that is taking care of the wealth, but everybody benefit of those wealth. Again, elections in Africa. I'm coming from a country that have been quoted during the discussion this morning that we are doing well. Senegal. Yes, we did well. But we did well because there is now more and more the people of Africa, the young people, the women, another kind of citizenship. You know, election is part of our problem rather than being part of the solution for many, many reasons. It's a sharing of the power, it's a domination by elite, etc., etc. So it brings conflict, it brings tension. And everybody was saying Senegal was going to be torn apart when we started our election. But people are coming in the street like they did in the Arab world. The young people. We had a group that just started, Yanamar, to say that we need really to rediscuss what is leadership about. Senegal have a history, a long history of democracy. We have the first president who retired from power, Senghor, the first in Africa. We had President Diop that was defeated, graciously left power, and President Wade, who have been part of our democratization process. He did well because he was in opposition for quite some time, and he came in power. And you come to Senegal, he has done a lot of things in terms of economic growth, in terms of infrastructure, schools, and so on. We should not deny that. But people wanted also, that other people come. Opposition have been outside for a long time, alternance, as we call it. That is your turn today, because this is the kind of power sharing. Tomorrow, we want to come and also to be part of the process, the issue of exclusion. So people come in the street and said, we need, another alternative, and they see that it was not possible. So I think there was a lot of mobilization. We saw that there was going to be maybe riot or war in Senegal, but this kind of citizenship that we see, women and children, we went out and mobilized. We didn't mobilize for a camp or another camp, but we mobilized to say Senegal first. We wanted to see our country to be on top. Do we belong to an ethnic clan? Yes. Do we vote for one party or another? Yes. But we should, for that reason, we should not, bring war in our country. I can share with you what we women of Senegal we did as a good example that the new citizenship of Africa are demanding to the leaders, either opposition or those who are in power. We were mediating ourselves, like in the case of Somalia. Women mediate. We went to see the religious leaders because they are part of the process, sometimes part of the problems. We see women in the political parties, and in the night, in the morning, we were mediating, making sure that we stop the violence, the tension. We train people to be observers, to be guardian for our elections. We train the media. We create something that we call the Women's Situation Room to monitor what is happening on the ground and making sure that everybody is accountable. We put pressure on the leadership. We put pressure on the political parties. We put pressure on the media. We continue that early warning and the early response by civil society and women's group, and we succeed. People say, miracle. But the miracle didn't happen one day. We did ourselves as African, and African women and African youth to say, we don't want another war in Senegal, but what we want in peace and stability to continue this economic growth that we are seeing in other corners of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a very powerful presentation. Thank you very much. Bekele, Geleta, not all of Africa's problems are political, as we've heard already. We have, the continent has natural disasters as well. But our image of that is that you send in aid agencies who come and save people. But is that your approach, or can you empower people who have been the victim of floods, of drought, to empower them to solve their problems for themselves?
Well, interesting question. Well, we can no more continue providing humanitarian aid the way we used to. People are building capacity. People have their own will. People have their own motivations. People have their own ambitions. And they are challenging the way humanitarian aid has been being given. So they want humanitarian assistance, if you like, on their terms now. And the terms are not in any way contrary to what we all want. I mean, what they want is, their term is they want to have the aid in such a way that it changes their lives. They don't want to be year in and year out making appeals to save their lives. And therefore, we are, as humanitarians, promoting disaster risk reduction, resilience, food security in Africa. Red Cross, for example, is working in 27 countries on food security. What is painful is the disasters in Africa are slow onset. Now, slow onset disasters are not media sensitive, or media doesn't really fall in love with slow onset. Well, I mean, they have their own reasons. They want people's stories. The people's stories are the bony children, the malnourished dying, etc. That is what's appealing to the eyes. Okay. Now, therefore, responses that are coming for slow onset disasters, to deal with the immediate nutritional aspect, but at the same time combine it with longer term programs so that people can become self-sufficient, is not forthcoming that easily. So there is a tremendous lot of campaign that is being done on that. I hope the world donor community will start changing in that direction. Now, essentially, yes, if disasters are not handled, if poverty is not handled, etc., governments cannot be stable. There's no question about it. Now, we need to have people who have the general will, people who accept what is happening, people who feel they own it, they belong to it, etc. So it is absolutely important that that side is handled well. But if I dare to comment on some of what you've been saying and become unpopular in the process, essentially, yes, human rights and the rule of law. One aspect I would want us to add is responsible citizenry. This is extremely important because corruption, I mean, it's very difficult, even if we have laws on the ground, if the overwhelming majority of the citizenry are not responsible citizens, okay, it becomes very difficult to detect. The corruption can still go on even if the systems are on the ground, etc. And it is very difficult to catch everybody and put everybody in prison also. It's a very interesting thing. And I mean, I'll tell you an anecdote. When I took over the Secretary General's position in the Federation, I addressed the staff. I told them, look, all of us who join humanitarian, especially Red Cross, are activists. There are tremendous lot of needs around which we will not be able to cover, us and as a humanitarian together, and therefore in the Red Cross we talk about what is not done rather than what is done. Okay? I told them, look, we will discuss democratically, we will try to decide together, consensus if possible, majority vote is not, if not, that is not possible, and occasionally, rarely, it could be that the chief executive, in this case myself, could have a veto power. Okay? Once decisions are made, no more discussions, no more against this, against that. We all march to implement. If you don't accept this, you better start moving out, otherwise I will move you out. And I did. I did move out some of them. Was I undemocratic? Was I... You see, there is a need to manage the economy. There is a need to be transparent, yes, to be accountable, yes, okay, where there is no valid reason for criticism without providing solutions. This is extremely important. Criticism, yes, but with solutions, okay. If it is just leveling criticism, it is not acceptable for the way I see it. Now, we have to move forward. We have to change Africa from the poverty level it is in. And that has to be managed. And the moment so many different opinions come on a thing that is moving on forward in the right direction, that can be very difficult, you know. It is going to delay Now, what I see...
Surely for stability, that people have got to feel that their voice has been heard. The government may not agree with them.
That is before the decision. That's what I mean. I mean, before the decision, that transparent, accountable, consultative, participatory, but decisions are done. Once they are done, it has to be moving forward. That's what I mean. What I say is, there is a need for building state institutions. Governments change, okay? State institutions are extremely important. I mean, and all of us as citizens should be respecting the state institutions. Sometimes the judiciary can make mistakes. But all the same, we have to accept and abide by the decision until it is overturned. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. Therefore, state institutions, stabilizing, legitimizing, respecting state institutions is extremely important, because governments change, state institutions remain.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back to that in discussion.
Well, I know I can be unpopular on this. I don't mind.
Now, Archbishop Makgoba, I've, as I said, been traveling in Africa for a very long time, and I think I can say, hand on heart, I've only met 2 or 3 African atheists. Everybody in Africa, almost everybody, is religious. And that's really good in difficult times, because the churches never run away, they stay with the people, they support them, they empower them. But on the other hand, with religion, with some religions, there is a certain passivity, like it's all in the hands of God, there's nothing I can do. So that's not very empowering, and it doesn't give the person a sort of democratic sense of worth. So where do you stand on that, and how do you think the churches can best contribute to a society which is equitable, and its government the government listens to it and is close to it? I mean, what is the role of the church in these situations?
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here, and to my fellow panelists. You're right. A church that is heavenly minded and of no earthly use is no church at all. In Africa, and particularly in the churches in Southern Africa, we have demonstrated that the eternal ideals of righteousness and love and peace needs to be realized here on earth. And that is why the likes of Archbishop Desmond Tutu during the difficult times in Southern Africa called for practical solutions, like calling for sanctions in order to bring down the apartheid system. That was actually undergirding a very important value that cut across most religions. And the value was the dignity of each human person, that all of us matter, whether you are an atheist, whether you're a believer, a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim. And so the church that lives to itself dies to itself. And so the church has to be involved in the everydayness of life, in the messiness of life. There's no dichotomy for the church between God and politics, because God is either God of all or no God at all. And so our mandate, I think, is bigger than political stability, because we don't have the pressures of term of office. It's bigger than CEOs who have to perform within a particular time. We believe that stability is very critical. We believe that justice is very critical. We believe that we have to offer critical solidarity with those that are in power. Support governments when they serve the people, and be critical of governments when they don't serve the people. And one of the ways now in post-apartheid South Africa, and possibly when I talk to some of my colleagues within the faith community, and incidentally, maybe, we've always been involved in health, welfare, and education as the churches, and have fostered that stability throughout Africa. But we are seeing the need for the church to be involved in partnership with NGOs, the private sector, and government in order to make those that were marginalized from economic activities to come to the fore. And I'm glad that the Royal Bafokeng King is here with us today, and the two of us have jointly initiated such a process called the Winds of Change, where we are saying the church NGOs, together with private sector and government, can offer a model that is sustainable, that says profit and politics must benefit people and the planet. So that is the role of the church in sum.
Thank you very much. Could we acknowledge the King? So I didn't know he was, yeah. Would you like to? Is he there? Oh. Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for it. Okay, and let's give a big round of applause to all our panelists before we come to questions. Right, let's come to questions now. If you've got a question for a particular speaker, please name the speaker, but otherwise, just ask a general question and I'll invite one of our panelists to respond. Would you like to start, please?
Okay. My name is Aisha Oyebode. I'm from Nigeria. And I think most of my questions, sort of interspersed with comments, will be directed at Mr. Mwencha from the perspective of the African Union. The first issue is always the issue of conflicts. Until we have obvious conflicts, most of the time, it's very difficult for the African Union to intervene, or they don't intervene. But then you see, what happens is that when we don't do anything when the early warning signals, by the time you know it, it degenerates into a major conflict and sometimes civil war. I think an example is what's going on presently in Nigeria, especially in the northern part with Boko Haram and this issue of terrorism. We understand that it's going beyond that. Civilian populations have been massacred. And these are the kind of things that we need the African Union to say to us, what are we able to do? What can we begin to do? The other issue has to do with elections. When Madame Diop was talking, I almost had tears in my eyes because we have similar situations in Nigeria. Every time just before elections, it's always a major, major situation. There's the general fear we're going to have peaceful elections, or we're going to have peaceful transitions. So we all come out and we try and, ensure that at least the elections, go through. But the problem is, what we end up doing is we cobble together a government. And then you wonder about the quality of the democracy, that emanates from these kind of situations. Because you can talk about free elections. Yes, people go out and vote. But are elections free and fair if the government, for example, is an incumbent government, which is always a problem in Africa because they use the resources of the state to, finance their elections. So in that regard, are the elections fair? And then when they then come in, do they feel accountable to the people? And that's why this Africa Peace and Stability Architecture that you were talking about has to actually start looking realistically about the issue of the quality of our democracies. Please, one last point quickly, because I know that we talk about, yes, people coming out on the streets and going the way of the Arab Spring. But one of the things we should recall is that most of the Arab Spring countries don't have democracy. We have democracies, very tenuous democracies, and so we're afraid to actually go out and challenge, because if we lose this democracy, what comes after it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that there's a question indeed for Mr. Mwencha.
Thank you very much, my dear sister, for that very important question. And
questions.
questions, actually, as my brother Sichinga is saying. The essence of your question is that we only intervene when there is a crisis. And perhaps I can describe the African peace and security architecture, how it looks like, for you to see. It may not be working very well, but the architecture is not just that you intervene in post-conflict. It has the following elements. We have what we call a Peace and Security Council that meets regularly. I don't know of anybody that meets as regular as that. Whenever there is a crisis, like now what is in Sudan, what is in Somalia, what is in Mali, they assist with the matter and they deliberate regularly, keeping abreast and making sure that they move to ensure that that process is completed. So that is pillar number one, which is Peace and Security Council. Below that, we have what we call the Council of the wise leaders, the Council of the Wise. Now, this council comprises elder statespersons. For a long time, it was chaired by the late president of Tunisia. Algeria was just passed on. And this council normally will go and look at issues of what is emerging in the continent, the trend in terms of politics, in terms of peace, and then sit with the leaders and suggest ways and means through which leaders can avoid these pitfalls. Then we have what we call, that is pillar number two. Number three is what we call early warning system. This is the least talked about because of the nature in which it operates. It has several parameters. There is what you call a situation room, where you collect the data, you analyze the data, you see trends of the country, the politics, the economics, and you are able to come up with a model to see a country drifting towards. But there is also what you use the Council of the Wise to intervene. Now, this intervention is usually very tricky. Tricky that in the sense that our leaders have their egos. And it is not quite easy for you to announce on the radio that today I was with President X, I intervened to say he has put in prison X leader or has curtailed freedom of X people. You only go and see them literally in the wee hours or in the night and then leave so that people don't get to know that. And there are several instances in Africa where that mechanism has worked. Then the fourth pillar of that is what we call standby forces. These are largely managed by regional economic communities. You know ICOMOG and the rest. I don't need to describe much of that. Then the fifth one, we have, of course, Peace and Security Fund. And that fund, we stay with the country. Once a conflict has ensued, negotiated peace, guns are silent, it doesn't mean peace and security has returned. You must stay to support the country for post-conflict reconstruction. That is normally a long process because you must put in place democratic institutions, support the government to put in place mechanisms of economic and the rest so that then the country starts to emerge out of conflict. So you are right. What is normally seen is when the helmets are there that you are intervening in a crisis and so forth. Now, you also bring in another element. In fact, many of these conflicts, like what you mentioned, the case of Nigeria, it's true that that crisis sometimes can go beyond a country. And indeed, in the case of Nigeria, it's beyond a country. Because we now have extremism, which has become another source of attraction, particularly to the youth, the unemployed, although I understand from Boko Haram, these are well-placed people. Sometimes they do it for their own selfish motives, to advance some extreme, either a religious position or a political gain, which if the country is unable to handle, it becomes an international issue, and sometimes it's very difficult to handle. In the case of West Africa, what we have seen now, the spread of arms, which are easily accessible, do bring in problems, the drugs that come in, and once these call it groups access this, they would even want to control the state powers, because then they can continue to run with it.
Can we, yeah, we've got to wrap up. Can I just ask if there is a mechanism with the African Union that if you have, and I can think of some, but all right, I won't name names, but where a government is clearly manipulating an election, is there a mechanism for the African Union to appeal over the heads of that government and speak directly to the people?
Yes,
for
people
of country X, you must stay peaceful, we're with you, we're support you. So that creates a feeling that the African Union represents the people of Africa in solidarity with a country that's got a pretty bad government.
That's true.
You have got that?
Yeah, election is not just an event. Election is a process. And when you get into a country, you can almost tell where there is going to be a problem of election, whether there is free press, the way the political parties operate, whether they're ethnic-based, religious-based, or you have an independent electoral system. So what we do is work with the governments. For instance, we've been supporting governments to establish what you might call credible electoral commissions or institutions that can manage elections. So there is a long process for a country to have a good election.
All right. Yes, let's be very quick now because we are running out of time. It'd be great to have some more questions. But yeah, Bineta.
Yes, I just wanted to, what my sister was saying on the issue of prevention, because for me elections are testing our democracy, testing our institution, and testing our leadership. And in those processes, we need ourselves to do the prevention. Of course, AU is here to help us, to see that internally sometimes we cannot do it, but they can come and accompany us. But we need inside member states to make sure that when we are looking in advance, we are putting National Electoral Commission, that we challenge the neutrality of this that mechanism. So we need to prevent ourselves by using all means to make sure that our institutions are well represented, they are neutral. So it's a real test before. So when election is there, it's not just the end of it, but the process have been done in a way that you have the right institution. That's what happened in Senegal with our army, for example. Is it a Republican army? Is it a army which is just for the one that is in power or not? So those things you have to work on it right in advance before the elections come, which might help you to prevent.
Thank you.
Richard,
just a quick,
very quick one. I think at the end of the day, we should not really look at the AU, and I beg to just make a point that might be contradictory to what my brother Mwencha may have said. But I think we should never look to the AU as a continental government yet. And I think that is very, very important for us to recognize. Number one, there is no replacement to comprehensive and sound constitutions within the individual states. Secondly, the issue of the electoral laws and the regulations, how well are they respected? Thirdly, the practicality of the law and the penalties that it carries. In most instances, both the AU and especially in the past and the regional groups as well, really they themselves have leaders who themselves need to be monitored. And because they themselves say, if I intervene at this particular stage, how about when it comes to my turn? Maybe they have the intentions of a third term and wanted to change their own constitutions. The fourth point is really having an impartial, credible, proactive judiciary. In other words, the prevention side is not going to come from AU, but the judiciary internally within the country. Then, of late, we have now seen the issue of a free and impartial media. My own country, for example, benefited so much from an independent media that went against the grain and carried the message of the other voice, so to say. And it was not a public media. It was a private media, but carried the message. It was with the people. And I think for us, that was a great help and turning point. And of course, the leaders themselves need to have respect for the laws that are made. And when they take they create presidents. These presidents live on because the next president will say, well, the other one did it, therefore I can also be able to do it. And the issue of the civil society is critical. The church in our country was very, very instrumental. The civil society stood. They are the people that go as observers. They ensure that you cannot cheat. Here, you've lied. They bring out certain issues. So the observer groups become an important element in all these elections. So that would be sort of thing that is happening at the local level, at the national level, rather than at the AU level.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, another question. I think you had one. Yeah. Please make it very short because we're rapidly running out of time.
Okay. Quick comment and then a question to Madam Diop. I wanted to know, how did the women organize themselves across the political divide? Was it across political divides, and how did they basically just put themselves together? But my other point has to do with the issue of fostering stability. I think the focus has been on elections, but democracy is more than elections, it's a mindset. And I think that's part of the problem I see with the AU. The AU is focused on preventive, it's more like a fire service. But we need to start building institutions in Africa that would basically focus on deepening and sustaining the democracy. In Ghana, for instance, where I come from, we have a National Commission for Civic Education, which I chair. And it's an independent constitutional commission, and the mandate is to sustain the democracy, to train the people about their rights and their responsibilities, but also to point out to government what the shortcomings are in developing our democracy. So I think we need to start looking at the proactive, preventive things we can do to deepen and sustain democracy, rather than fighting fires when there's an election.
Okay, thanks. And there was one more question over here, which we'll take straight away, and I think that may be, well, we've got a couple of minutes. All right, we'll just take two. There's one here and one there. Yeah, all right.
Edward Pace, Africa Research Institute. I'd just like to pick up, sir, on your concept of responsible citizenry. This is a very problematic concept. Responsible citizenry has been the rallying cry of every potty autocracy since time immemorial. The real problem with it is that the power to judge who is responsible and if a citizenry is behaving responsibly is always seemingly in the hands of the incumbent government and not outsiders, and therefore it's a seductive but very dangerous notion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and the gentleman over there. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm James Nyoro from the Rockefeller Foundation. I have a question to Archbishop, because we are seeing religion becoming another source of instability in the continent, particularly the differences between the Christians and the Muslims. Is this something that we should be concerned about or do something about, or how are we as a continent dealing with this?
Okay. Very good. And okay, let's take those in reverse order. Yeah, Archbishop.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, I think we should become intolerant of any intolerance as a community, and we should worry when there is religious conflict and try to promote interreligious dialogue like we are doing globally and where I come from. And certainly a lot of people have taken advantage of the differences within the Abrahamic faiths and have over-magnified the differences in order to push a particular ideology. But on the whole, I think most religions are about peace, stability, respect, honor, and to say, how do we honor the dignity of each person as created in the image of God? And there are other NGOs, I mean, Peter's here from Amnesty International and the rest, who work within some of those religious contexts to say, let's spread hope in Africa rather than over-diagnose our problems and concentrate on the negativity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think there was a question for you, Madam Diop. Yeah? About how did you bridge the divide?
Yeah.
A very quick answer, please.
Very quick answer. we brought the women, we mediate among them. We are not homogeneous. We belong to different ethnic, different political party. But what we did in this election in Senegal, we mediate among those women, high level in the political party. We brought them together. And we use the wise women, like the AU are having the panel of the wise. We had in that situation room a group of credible and wise women in Senegal. All the women that everybody respects. They brought everybody together and we discuss. We close our door and we say, are we going really to bring conflict tomorrow because you want to be in power or the other you want to leave? And I think what we did at the end is the symbol, using our culture. We took our lapa, you know, we put it on the ground and we say that, can we swear and sign that when we go back to our political parties, that we are not going to promote violence and we don't fight each other. It was a great, great achievement. And on television, they came together to say that we are together as a group of women. I think that is something that was successful by bringing women around a common agenda and a positive one. Just briefly on the issue of leadership and the citizenship, and I agree with you that sometimes you need leadership that take decision, and the fact that you say that, but you do consultation. You make sure that you get from your people. What I will add, and that is what my father used to tell me, is a great leader is somebody also who take decision at the right time for the people after consulting, especially the women. But at the end of the day, when he make mistake, he will recognize that I have made mistake and I learn lesson from my mistake. So not just leaving it there, but making sure that that mistake is not repeated, because everybody make mistake. Thank you.
Yes, one quick word from you.
Okay, I mean, I see where you come from, but let's just look at Africa's problems. Look at Congo, look at Somalia, look at part of where we are suffering from conflict. Look at the stories about corruption, etc. Look at the differences that are all of a sudden a government comes to power and then there is a huge outcry of the media. This has been done wrong, that has been done wrong, etc., etc. I mean, the kind of tolerance from the citizenry, it simply doesn't give a chance to governments to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. It's extremely important to let go, allow them to have the chance to consult, to allow participation, sometimes to make mistakes, okay? Now, we are all human beings, we are not gods, and the Prime Minister, Presidents, and Parliament, they are human beings as well. Judiciary, they are human beings as well. And in the process of transition, the expectation of the people is so huge that it becomes very difficult to meet expectations of everybody. Anybody, any group can raise any issue as a failure, okay? Now, this does not give chance to change, to transformation. Now, as I have said a number of times in a number of meetings, I have said the Singaporeans, for example, the Hong Kongians, the South Koreans, and Europe and North America, during the early phases of their transition, they did combine an element of democracy and autocracy, okay? Not too much autocracy, not too much democracy. Keep a critical balance until there is a good, good middle class, good education, and the citizenry is, the overwhelming majority of the citizenry is educated, is wiser, and can make the best choice for the country. Now, it really takes time.
I think we could go on discussing that, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. But thank you very much to our panelists and to you, to everybody here. Very interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you to you.
To you, Mr. Moderator.